The mansion was silent. Too silent. Golden chandeliers glowed above a dining table long enough to seat 30 guests. But every chair stood empty, polished wood gleaming without a single place setting disturbed. The air smelled faintly of roses from the floral arrangements that had been delivered that morning, now standing untouched at the center of the room. A perfectly iced cake sat at the end of the table, its candles waiting, its sugar flowers pristine, and not a soul there to celebrate. She looked down at the expensive gown she had chosen for herself. Diamonds glittering at her wrist. On paper, she had everything. Wealth that newspapers liked to print numbers about. Property that covered more ground than some neighborhoods. Her name in headlines, her face in magazines. The kind of life others dreamed of. And yet, on her birthday, she sat alone at her own table. She twisted the stem of her wine glass slowly, the deep red liquid glinting in the candlelight. Birthday after birthday, she thought, she had always assumed things would change. Growing up poor, she used to tell herself that loneliness would vanish when she had money, that friends only cared about people who could shine, that success would fill every empty corner. But success only made those corners darker. There had been parties before, yes, but they weren't for her. Not really. They had been for her wealth, for the name attached to it. Crowds of people clapping, toasting, posing for cameras, not one of them sincere. And when she stopped throwing those extravagant events, when she decided to see who truly cared without the lure of glitter and champagne, no one stayed. Now the phone on the side table lay silent. No calls, no messages except automated reminders. No one knocking at the gate. No staff bustling around except those paid to perform their duties. It was just her, a millionaire on her birthday, with no one who wanted to sit across from her without being paid to do so. She set her glass down gently, the sound against the table echoing too loudly in the cavernous room. A single thought burned in her chest. What is the point of all this if I can't share it? Closing her eyes, she let out a long breath. The silence was unbearable, the kind of silence that eats through even the strongest pride. She couldn't sit in that dining hall another minute. Grabbing her coat, she whispered aloud to the empty mansion, "Not tonight. Not like this." And with that, she slipped out into the night, searching for something no amount of money had ever been able to buy. The city lights spread ahead of her like jewels spilled across black velvet. Her car eased through quiet streets, headlights reflecting off glass towers and neon signs. She didn't know where she was going at first. She only knew she couldn't sit another moment in that house of echoing silence. Finally, she stopped in front of a small, cozy restaurant she had passed many times before but never entered. No velvet ropes, no paparazzi waiting outside, just a warm glow spilling from the windows onto the sidewalk. It wasn't the kind of place people would expect a millionaire to dine, but maybe that was the point. She walked inside, the bell over the door chiming softly. Conversations and laughter filled the air, the clinking of cutlery a chorus that made her heart ache with longing. A waiter greeted her politely, not recognizing her face, something she found oddly refreshing. "Table for one?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Table for one, always for one." He led her to a corner table near a window, set neatly for a single diner. A white candle flickered gently, casting soft shadows on her face as she sat. She removed her coat, pretending not to notice the groups around her. Families leaning across tables to share bites, couples holding hands over plates, friends laughing so loudly their joy spilled into the room like sunlight. She sipped her water slowly, trying to keep her eyes from betraying the emptiness she felt. Soon the waiter returned and asked if she'd like something special. Hesitating only for a moment, she whispered almost shyly, "It's my birthday." The waiter smiled kindly. "Then we'll make sure you get a cake." He didn't ask about guests. He didn't pry. He just left her with that kindness, which somehow hurt almost as much as it comforted. Across the room, she noticed a man and a little girl tucked into a small table beside the window. Their clothes were simple, worn, but their smiles were full and unfiltered. The girl giggled as her father pretended to swipe her dessert spoon, her laughter bright and bubbling like music. He gave her an exaggerated wink, and she laughed harder. The millionaire woman couldn't look away. It wasn't the food. It wasn't the decorations. It was the connection, the warmth she had craved even more than the finest cake or the glittering mansion she had left behind. As the waiter placed a small slice of chocolate cake with a single candle in front of her. She felt a sting behind her eyes. Here she was, one candle lighting her solitude, while just across the room was a flame she hadn't felt in years. Family, real and unpolished, glowing from one table she didn't sit at. She lowered her eyes, whispering to herself, "Happy birthday." But before the words were swallowed by loneliness, a gentle little voice piped up from across the room. "Are you celebrating alone?" The woman blinked, startled as the soft little voice reached her. She lifted her head, and there stood the girl from across the room, holding a spoon in one hand and looking at her with wide, innocent eyes. Her smile was small but genuine. "My dad and we're sharing cake," the girl said, her voice as sweet as the frosting on her plate. Then, tilting her head with surprising seriousness for someone so young, she added, "Nobody should have to eat cake alone on their birthday." The millionaire's chest tightened. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had heard countless empty offers in her life. Invitations, designed to climb her social ladder, to take pictures with her name, to be seen with her for what she could give. But this offer? This one was pure. A child who saw her sitting alone and thought only of kindness. The man quickly stood from their table and approached, a little embarrassed. "I'm so sorry," he said politely, resting his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She's very social. Didn't mean to bother you." But before he could usher her away, the woman found her voice soft and breaking. "She didn't bother me, in fact—" She paused, glancing at the glow of her single candle. "She might have just given me the best birthday gift I've had in years." The father studied her for a moment, sensing the truth behind her words. He offered a small smile, hesitant but warm. "Would you like to join us? We don't have much, but you're welcome." Her instinct was to decline. After all, she was a woman who lived in mansions, ate in the finest restaurants, stood in boardrooms with power and presence. But right now, none of that mattered. None of it had kept her from feeling invisible at her own birthday. So she smiled faintly, standing to her feet. "I would love to." The little girl beamed, leading her by the hand to their small table. The woman lowered herself into the chair, her gown shimmering awkwardly among their worn but neatly pressed clothes. Yet she had never felt more at home. The father cut her a slice of their cake and slid it toward her. "It's not fancy," he said. She took a bite, the sweetness mixing with something unfamiliar. Laughter. The little girl giggled, telling a story about her doll, and for the first time in years, the millionaire woman laughed. Not a polite, rehearsed laugh for cameras. Not a hollow one, but real laughter bubbling up freely, filling the lonely parts of her that wealth had never reached. That night, with strangers who owed her nothing, she felt something she had missed most: family. The hours seemed to melt away as they sat together. Three mismatched souls sharing a table. A powerful woman who had everything. A hard-working single father who had very little. And a little girl who didn't notice the difference between the two. They laughed, they shared stories, and somehow the conversation wove easily. The little girl leaned against the woman as though she had known her all her life, telling her about school, her favorite cartoons, and the way her dad always burned toast in the mornings. The millionaire listened intently, smiling with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the conversations of boardrooms or business dinners. It was simple, human, real. When the dessert was finished and the plates cleared away, the father reached for his wallet. His hands moved awkwardly, counting the bills carefully, and she noticed how he hesitated, making sure he had enough. She knew what the numbers on that check meant to him. The quiet stretching of expenses, the sacrifices behind every dollar. She touched his hand lightly and shook her head. "This one's on me," she said gently. "Please, let me do this." He began to protest, but her gaze silenced him. Not with superiority, but with gratitude. Quietly, she slipped her card to the waiter, adding on a little extra. Enough that the father's entire meal and even a gift card for future visits would be covered. She didn't mention it. She didn't make a show. It was simply her way of thanking him for what he had given her without even realizing it. Love, warmth, a reminder that she wasn't invisible. As they stepped outside, the night air was cool, the city softly buzzing around them. The little girl grabbed her hand again, squeezing as she looked up with wide eyes. "Happy birthday," she said brightly. "See? You weren't alone after all." The words sank deep into her heart. Sweeter than any gift she'd ever been given, she bent down, hugging the little girl tightly. For the first time, she felt tears, not of loneliness, but of joy. The father offered a quiet nod. Respect and understanding passing silently between them. No debts, no expectations. Just two people who had found something human in each other. As she drove back toward her mansion later that night, the tall gates and glittering lights didn't feel so empty anymore. She smiled to herself, whispering the lesson into the darkness of her car. Riches mean nothing without someone to share them with. Tonight I was the richest woman in the world, not because of money, but because two strangers gave me their kindness, and, for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone.